Oh. Game over. Oh, hi there. I didn't see you. Just playing a little 3DS. My name is James, and I'm back on my blind semicircle. Nintendo was known as a pretty big powerhouse for JRPGs in those first couple of generations, but what is often overlooked is the smaller crop of JRPGs that were available for the Nintendo Game Boy. In 1989, Squaresoft was looking to capitalize on the popularity of the Game Boy, seeing how well the version of Tetris had sold for the handheld system. Following the successful work on Final Fantasy 1 and 2, Square tapped Akitoshi Kawazu and his compatriot Koichi Ishii to head up the team. However, instead of making a puzzle game or a platformer, which were more common on the Game Boy, they decided to stick to Squaresoft's niche and make a JRPG instead. One thing that was really important to them was instead of making something more simple and streamlined like a Final Fantasy game, they wanted something with much more mechanical complexity. This game would be the first installment in the now long-running Saga series. They specifically designed it to be an enjoyable experience for a handheld game, keeping the playtime down to roughly 10 hours and allowing for saving at any point. Nobuo Uematsu was also tapped to write the music for it. Despite never having worked with the Game Boy sound chip before, he was able to compose 15 different tracks for the game, which, while it doesn't seem like much by modern standards, was an impressive feat considering the limited space on Game Boy cartridges, which would have been even less than a Nintendo cartridge. Plenty of Nintendo games at the time didn't even have more than 10 tracks. When localizing, Squaresoft sought to cash in on the popularity of the Final Fantasy series in the West. Well, I guess at that point, only one game in the West. And so released in America under the title Final Fantasy Legend. Later, this would receive a port to the Japanese-only handheld console by Bandai, the WonderSwan Color, which gives it a graphical facelift and updates the music a little bit. The next two games in the Saga series, also on the Game Boy, would be released under the Final Fantasy Legends banner as well. While the Saga series would never be as popular as its sister, the Final Fantasy series, it did have a very strong cult following, especially once emulators and translation projects became much more widespread and we had a lot more access to games that had been previously exclusive to Japan. So what I want to look at today is the first installment in the Saga series, Makai Toshi Saga, or The Warrior in the Tower of Spirit. Just as a side note, I played through a translated version of the WonderSwan Color port, which has some nice quality of life improvements and makes the gameplay overall much smoother.
Character creation. Humans are strong physical fighters but can't use magic at all. They also have the largest inventory space at 8 slots. They don't level up in the traditional sense, however. Instead, you can buy items that increase strength, agility, or HP. The only way for them to gain additional defense is through equipping armor. Mutants play a little more similarly to a typical JRPG character, but take the Final Fantasy II model of leveling, where when a battle is completed there is a chance that a mutant character's stats will increase, and that is any stat, so they can get growths in HP, strength, agility, defense, and most importantly mana, so they can utilize both weapons that scale with mana or spellbooks. However, they can't increase their stats through items like humans can. They also have more limited access to items as they only have 4 available slots. The other 4 slots are taken up by their abilities, which they will gain randomly as you finish battles. These are anything from passive buffs to status effect resistances, attack spells, and even weaknesses to elemental damage. Abilities have limited uses and can be recovered in inns, Unfortunately, there is no way to lock in an ability once it is gained, so these are best used liberally and not to be leaned on too heavily. Monsters are the most unique race and also the most limited. They have set stats, abilities, and passive buffs or weaknesses. They can restore their abilities at ends like mutants can. The way that a monster levels up, however, is by eating monster meat. At the end of a battle, you have a chance of getting monster meat that you can feed to your monster to change them into a different one. Monsters are separated into different tiers and different families. The only way to get to the next tier of monster is to feed your monster a meat of a monster that is at a higher tier. This usually happens when you get boss monster meat or move into a new world. The other caveat with monsters is they can't equip any items or armor, nor can they increase their stats like humans. So they're kind of the what you see is what you get option. Equipment. Weapons in this game are separated into 10 different categories: bows, cannons, daggers, guns, explosives, martial arts, swords, whips, spellbooks, and a miscellaneous category. Weapons have durability or a certain amount of uses in a similar way to the early Fire Emblem games. Armor comes in the traditional head, chest, arm, and shield variety. They give you a static defense boost, and you can only equip one of each type. Shields are unique in that they also have durability and have to be used for you to defend, like you would in a typical JRPG. The last little wrinkle in the game is that each character has a limited amount of times that they can die in battle and respawn. Each character has 3 heart points. Once your character falls in battle, they can either be recovered in town or with an item, but doing so requires 1 heart point. Once all of your heart points are gone, you have to hire a new character from the guild. You can buy more heart points from some item stores, but they are pretty expensive and usually out of your price range, so it's better to focus on keeping your characters alive. This is a prototype version of what would later become the LP or life point system in the Romancing Saga games. Although, interestingly enough, it doesn't make an appearance in the latter 2 entries in the Game Boy trilogy. Story. The game has a pretty simple story setup, but actually does some interesting subversions towards the end of the game. So at the beginning, we are told that there is a tower that reaches up to the heavens, and whomever is able to climb it will find paradise. So your main character forms a party of intrepid adventurers and sets out. One of the things I like about this game's story is it's really well organized into different sections. The game itself has an overarching plot that you're working towards progressing, but each part of the game is broken up into short stories that are centered around the different worlds that you visit. In the first section, you need a key to get into the tower, but the key itself is locked inside a statue sitting in the center of Heroes Town. In order to unlock that key, you have to visit the 3 kings of your land and get a part of the statue that they each hold, that being the king's armor, the king's shield, and the king's sword. Armor King is in love with Eyeball Girl, but she can't leave because there are bandits threatening the village. Clear them out, and Armor King will be happy to give you his armor as a reward. Sword King is just grumpy and wants to fight everyone. Kill him and get his sword. Finally, Shield King seems to be acting weird. There are guards patrolling his castle that will throw you out. When you make it to the throne room, you see that he has been poisoned by his advisor. He's about to try and pin it on the heroes, but they chase him down and take him out. The shield is yours for the taking. After reuniting the different pieces with the statue, the heroes find a sphere and are confronted by the first boss, Genbu, who is guardian of this world. Take him out and unlock the tower with the crystal you got. After climbing about 5 floors of the tower, you reach a whole new world, the Ocean Kingdom. Here, there's a guardian dragon who lives in an underwater palace, and he has the sphere that you need. But in order to reach him, you'll have to find a seed that lets you breathe underwater. Luckily, there's a floating island that you can drive around. After talking to a reclusive old man who gives you the location of the air seed, we head down to the underwater castle. Defeating Seiryu nets us the blue orb, but we aren't quite done yet. Taking the blue orb back to the old man, he will give you the red orb, but only if you do a fetch quest for him. Do it, and we can combine the 2 orbs and open the next gate. Climbing up the tower farther brings us to the Sky Kingdom. Here, the guardian, Byakko, is a despot, but he has a flying fortress where he hides. We get into a fight with some of his men, but they are so impressed by our power that they conscript us into his forces. Our first task is to track down the leader of the resistance. We are also given a little airship to get around. We catch up to her, surrounded by Byakko's forces, and decide to switch sides and save her. She tells you that she needs to get her sister back, who's been captured. So we go back to break her out, but uh-oh, it's a trap. She's been working with Byakko this whole time, and he set you up. We wake back up in the prison and have to beat feet to save our rebel leader, Jean. We confront Byakko, and he tries to kill Muriel, Jean's sister, having no more use for her. At the last second, her sister Jean steps in to save her, and we get our third boss battle. After he dies, the crystal seems to leave with him. When this happens, we get our third sphere after all. Climbing up the tower some more, we come across the 4th world, the ruined city. Despite guns showing up every once in a while, this is our first explicitly modern or even sci-fi zone that we get. Here the city has been ruined by Suzaku, who kills anyone he catches on the surface. And to top it all off, he also has a force field that prevents him from taking damage. Traveling through the abandoned subway tunnels, our heroes run across a girl beset by monsters. Saving her, she tells us there's a town nearby and runs off. Catching back up with her at the bar, she introduces us to the boss, who has a plan to get rid of Suzaku's force field, but of course needs some help with it. We also get a motorbike that makes traveling across the overworld much faster. We go around to a library and an abandoned city to get some electronics. When we finally get back to the boss, he tells us that the last thing that we need to make the device work is to get some plutonium. So off to the reactor we go. Finally at the top, the boss sacrifices himself so we can get it. When we return to the town afterwards, however, we find that Suzaku has killed everyone and taken the girl we saved as a hostage. We chase him down, activate the device, and take him out. The girl reveals that the boss had the next sphere and gives it to us as a present. At the very top of the tower, we are confronted by Asura, leader of the other bosses that we fought. He's kind of a pushover, and just as our brave heroes are about to cross the threshold into paradise, there's a pitfall and the party is dumped down at the bottom of the tower again. Though you start back at the beginning town, you'll notice that many NPCs from the different worlds that you've helped and talked to have made it out here. Interestingly enough, when you enter the tower again, by unlocking it with all the crystals, you'll find that you're not climbing through the main body, but you're going around kind of a scaffolding that's set up along the exterior of the tower. At each 5-floor increment, you will refight a version of the world boss that you previously fought here. Finally, when you get to the very top of the tower again, you are greeted with none other than the creator himself. And he's kind of surprised to see you. See, it turns out that he made Asura to spice things up because a peaceful world was just too boring. But then he started to get bored with the chaos that Ashura would cause, and created the myth of paradise for climbing the tower so he could watch mortals struggle. He offers you anything you want as a reward just for getting here, but our heroes are pretty understandably pissed by this and just decide to kill him. After the final blow is this is a pretty impressive little game. There are a lot of little mechanical complexities to it that wasn't typical to see for games of this time especially. Ultima and wizardry are often listed as huge influences on JRPGs in the early days, but it's cool to see one that hews a little bit closer to something like Ultima than its other contemporaries. However, because of the limited capabilities of the Game Boy, the mechanical complexity doesn't do the game any favors other than being impressive. In the Game Boy version, it gives you very little information about equipment, and all of the monster transformations you have to do are completely blind. While this is fixed slightly in the WonderSwan port, it still doesn't give you information on weapon scaling or base attack power of the weapons. This means that you have to read through the manual, which understandably was more common for games at the time, but even looking there, oftentimes the translations were less than ideal or gave you incomplete or imperfect or just downright wrong information. The idea of monsters as a race in this game seems really cool, but in practice they feel pretty underpowered. I played through the beginning of the game with a monster and ended up dropping him for another mutant because the monster would just die all the time. And honestly, for that matter, humans don't seem to really be worth it in my experience. For the whole game, my mutants were way stronger than my humans were. Since all stats cap at 99, and mutants get there without spending money on raising their stats, they seem to be the better and more economical choice. Even though reading through the manual, they caution you against using a whole party of mutants. I think while they might be weaker in the short term, they end up being the strongest party that you can choose. Limited inventory space really sucks. I think I understand what they were going for, making a mechanical difference in each of the races in terms of what they can carry and equip, but in practice it just feels annoying and tedious to deal with. Also, because weapons have a limited amount of uses in this game, you end up carrying around a bunch of junk weapons that you just use on random encounters and trying to save your stronger weapons for boss battles or stronger monsters. But what this means in practice is all of the inventory space that you would be using carrying healing items or status recovery items is taken up with a bunch of random nonsense. The encounter rate can be pretty rough too. It was designed that way on purpose, so that people playing the game on short commutes like a train ride would still feel like they're making progress in the game, even though they're playing in short sessions, but it gets really bad in the latter half of the game, particularly the ruined city section where you are hounded at every step on the world map by Suzaku. Even with the motorbike, you still run into a ton of encounters with him, and you can't do anything but run away from him. One of the things I will say in this game's favor is, for the most part, it does a pretty good job of telling players where they should be and what they should be doing. People in towns almost always have relevant information and can help point players to different locations on the map. That being said, there were a few times when I had to look at a walkthrough to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. And honestly, if you were interested in playing this game yourself, I would recommend at least playing it with a walkthrough open so you can reference it whenever you need to. So overall, I think this is a cool and interesting game, but probably something better left in the past. My guess is as I continue to play other games in the trilogy, it will be pretty clear that this game is irrelevant by comparison. If you are interested in playing this game, you can obviously get it on the original Game Boy, or play it through the Super Game Boy attachment for Super Nintendo. There is a functioning emulator for the WonderSwan version, as well as an English translation. I think maybe that would be the most ideal way to play it. There was also a re-release of the Final Fantasy Legend games bundled for the Nintendo Switch released last year. That would also be an incredibly accessible way to play it. I don't know if it has any quality of life updates or translation differences or like save states, but that might be worth checking out if this seems interesting to you. I want to give a really quick shout out to the YouTube channel DavidInc, who let me use footage from his Let's Play for the last section of this video because I forgot to turn on my capture program because I'm dumb. Thanks, Dave. I'll put a link to his channel in the description as well.
Well, we've done it again, friends. We've made it to the end of another video. As always, if you liked what you saw, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Let me know in the comments what strange Game Boy JRPGs you remember playing growing up. I plan on covering the next two Saga games as well, so keep a lookout for those. But until next time, please enjoy clips of me not being able to talk. In 1989, Squaresoft was looking to... Nobuo Uematsu, trip all over these names. They specifically designed it to be an enjoyable experience for a handheld game, keeping the playtime acclaim and success as its sister, the Final Fantasy series. It did have a strong cult following and... Nope, I don't know what I'm saying. So what I want to look at in this... Nope. Let me know in the comments what strange Game Boy JRPGs you play. Nope. On notifications. Let me know in the comment if you guys grew up. Nope. If you guys grew up. Let me know in the comments if you grew up.